That's the funny thing about art is like when you start off, you think you're amazing, and then you realize 2 years later that you're not, and you think you're a lot better than you are, and then you realize two years later from that you thought you were amazing back then. It's like all these stages. You're like, it takes a level of self awareness to be like, yeah, I'm a lot better than I used to be, but I'm still not anywhere. I still have a long way to go, kind of thing, right?
No, it's the artistic cycle of being like, oh, you finally get to the point where you're like, oh, now I'm good. And then about like 2 weeks later, you look back and you're like, you know,
Exactly.
and maybe it's
Exactly.
not 2 years. But I mean, I loved it, and I was like showing music to my friends. I like always. There's a couple of my friends in high school that actually listened and was like, "Yeah, this is sick," and I listened back and I'm like, "Oh, it was so bad." Thank you for like saying that because it really like, it's important to have that support system and
Sure.
have people around you who really think it's cool. So I was doing that all throughout high school, but it was always like a side hobby. Even my dad did music, but he was always like, you shouldn't, it should be like a hobby, it should be like a side thing. And then like I was good at math, so go into more of like a traditional engineering or computer science type thing. So throughout high school, that was kind of always my plan in the back of my head was like, okay, when I go to college, I'm going to go to a nice college, I'm going to go into computer science or engineering, and then I'm going to do music as a side gig, and kind of like, maybe that works out, maybe it doesn't type of like energy.
Hmm.
And it only when I was like actually faced with the decision of going to college that was the moment where I decided like, oh, I'm going to do this with my life. Because basically the whole story there is I applied to a bunch of schools, and all of them for computer science and engineering. And I got denied from like everything, which like looking back,
Sure.
I'm so thankful for it, honestly, because I would have done it. I would have just gone. But like my one shot at music was I was trying to do the dual degree program between Harvard and Berkeley. And like that was my way of appeasing my family and like what they say about getting a nice education, following the more traditional route, and also being able to do music. Because like my grandparents, for example, would be like, oh, he's going to Harvard. And I would be like, oh, I'm going to Berkeley. I'm doing music. Let's go.
How does that work? I've never heard of that. The dual degree program between the two.
Yeah, I have a couple friends that have done it. It's like you're mainly at Harvard, but you're enrolled at both schools, and you can take as many classes at Berkeley as you want. So you
Wow.
have both the very educational, and you take like a traditional major at Harvard. So you have the very intense educational side over there, and then you have intense musical
So
education.
you were accepted into Harvard. Is it the same process of getting accepted into Harvard like every other thing else?
So I was waitlisted actually, and that was like I had tried for that. So that was like at that point, that was the hardest I worked for anything in my life, was to try to get into this Harvard and Berkeley program, and I failed. So that was like a moment for me where I was like, oh, I guess I shouldn't do music, honestly.
Hmm.
And I ended up getting accepted to NYU for computer science. This was like after the point I've been beaten down from the Harvard and Berkeley thing, and I was like,
Sure.
that was my one shot. I tried, I messed up, and I was going to NYU for computer science. And I was signing up for class. I actually completely enrolled. There's like a newspaper article about me from like my hometown being like, he's going to NYU, blah, 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 and stuff like that. Like I was enrolled. I had a roommate, was fully ready to move in. And I was signing up for classes actually. It was like late June 2018, and I couldn't sign up for any music classes at all because they keep the schools so separate. And I had been expecting like, okay, I'm going to go to do computer science at NYU, but maybe I'm going to take some music classes at Steinhardt or the other schools. And it was this moment where I was like really faced with it. I was like, okay, if I do this, I cannot do music. And like I thought about what my life would look like, and I thought about what I love to do, and I was like, I think I would hate this. If I couldn't do music at all. And then I was like, so if that's that important to me, and if it's that much like I fill my free time with it, what am I doing? And it was like, at that point, I'm 18. I'm choosing colleges. There hasn't been like a big life decision like that,
Sure.
really. And this was the moment where, completely independently of anybody, I was like, okay, I'm going to do music, and there isn't a plan B. There's like no going back. There is the only person that's going to make this happen for me is me. And it was like this big moment where I called back Berkeley, and I was like, please, I know I turned you guys down or like decline the offer or whatever, but take my money. I would love to go. And they were like, yeah, of course we'll take you back. They like figured it all out. I didn't have a dorm room when I moved. So I just like, I sent it to Boston. I drove up without a dorm room. I didn't even know where I was going to live in Boston, but I knew like that was I was like, I'm going to go to Berkeley and I'm going to work my ass off, because I'm just going to like sit through this like 4 year college experience and be like, hopefully I end up with like a job at the end of it. Or, it was very like, I'm not taking this for granted.
Hmm.